I spent my entire life giving love, time, money, and pieces of myself until one evening, seated at a table I had carefully set in a home I had built, I heard something that shattered my spirit. This isn't just a story about humiliation. It's about awakening. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, what I'm about to share is for you. The house smelled like rosemary chicken, slow roasting in the oven since early morning. Jazz music drifted from the speakers. The wine glasses sparkled. I wasn't even supposed to be at this dinner, but I stayed because Aria, my son's wife, had forgotten to tell me her parents were coming again, and the house had to look perfect again. When her mother looked at me with an eyebrow raised and asked, "And you are?" Aria let out a laugh and said, "Oh, that's Evelyn, our unofficial maid. Keeps everything running." They laughed, even Caleb, my son. I stood there holding the bottle of Merlot I had just brought up from the cellar, smiling politely, pretending my heart wasn't breaking into quiet pieces. That night, everything I believed about my place in this world began to unravel. Have you ever been overlooked after giving it your all? Hit that like button if you know your worth. Subscribe for more powerful stories about standing strong, because sometimes the best response is silence and a set of keys. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of the bed I once painted sky blue, staring at the chipped door frame that held more memories than anyone in that house seemed to remember. I had spent over 2 decades turning that place into a home, layer by layer, dollar by dollar, sacrifice after sacrifice. And now in a single moment, I had been reduced to the maid. The next morning, I made coffee like I always did. I fed Jasper, the tabby cat Aria only pretended to like when guests were around, and then I waited. Aria came downstairs in her overpriced yoga outfit, scrolling on her phone, not even looking up as she passed me by. That was the moment. I reached into my pocket and pulled out every single key I had: the front door, the garage, the mailbox, the back gate, and held them out to her. "What's this?" she asked, eyebrows knitted in annoyance more than confusion. I smiled, a small, tight curve of the lips that held years of pain behind it. "Good luck with the mortgage," I said softly. She blinked. "Excuse me?" I didn't answer. I walked down the hall I had painted myself, past the photos I had framed, past the rug I had saved for months to afford, and out the front door, taking nothing but my purse and the coat I wore the day I brought Caleb home from the hospital. He came running after me in the driveway, barefoot, shouting my name. But I didn't stop. I didn't slam the car door. I closed it gently, calmly, because something in me had snapped, but not out of rage, not even grief. It was clarity. Clarity doesn't scream, it whispers, and it whispered to me, "You're done." I drove without knowing exactly where I was going. The sky was turning amber above the highway, the way it always did in Oregon in early fall. All I knew was I couldn't stay. That night, I arrived at the old apartment left to me by my great-aunt Miriam. It smelled of dust and decades past, worn floorboards, faded wallpaper, and a heater that wheezed like it was tired of trying. But it was mine. It didn't ask me to be anything. It just existed. So did I. I stood in the center of the kitchen with nothing but silence around me and asked myself the question I had avoided for so long. What happens to a woman after she's given everything she has to people who only ever took? I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stood there, letting the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. I wasn't free yet, but I was no longer imprisoned. And that was the beginning. It was 3 nights after I moved into my Aunt Miriam's old apartment that I found it, tucked away in the upstairs closet behind a broken floor lamp and a moth-eaten quilt. A rusted metal trunk, the kind with a latch that clanged when opened. I thought it might hold old photo albums, maybe forgotten linens. But what I found instead was a stack of yellowed envelopes, a few hospital records, and a single photograph that made my knees buckle. It was a newborn baby, wrapped in a striped hospital blanket, his tiny eyes shut, lips pursed like a whisper. A name was written on the back in faded ink, Michael Jameson. The letter on top was in Aunt Miriam's delicate script. The date at the top read, October 2nd, 1992, the day Caleb was born. My hands trembled as I read. She had been a nurse in the maternity ward back then. According to her letter, something strange happened the night I gave birth. A last-minute room change, mismatched wristbands, a chaotic shift. She'd raised her concerns, but by the time anyone listened, the babies had already gone home. The records had been quietly buried. Years later, after Miriam retired, she discovered a settlement from the hospital, a quiet payout made to another family. That's when she knew. Caleb wasn't my son. I dropped the letter. My breath left me. I had raised this boy alone, loved him unconditionally. I gave up my career, cleaned motels and stocked shelves just to make sure he never missed a meal. And yet, the coldness I had felt from him all these years, the distance, the apathy, it suddenly made sense. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't imagining it. I had loved a child who, in blood, wasn't mine. And the boy I should have raised had grown up in this same town, unbeknownst to me. His name was Michael Jameson. I whispered it aloud in the quiet of that small apartment. The name felt foreign, yet familiar, like a word I'd always known but never spoken. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the fog creep over the streetlights, the city wrapped in the same heavy silence that now lived inside me. But strangely, I didn't feel grief. I felt release. Because now I understood every missed thank you, every backhanded comment, every moment I stood in that house and wondered why I always felt like a stranger. It had a reason. I hadn't failed as a mother. I just hadn't been raising my son. And in that moment, the woman who once questioned her worth, who once thought love had passed her by, began to feel something new. Not closure, not yet, but a flicker of purpose, a new thread pulling her toward the truth, toward Michael. For weeks, I didn't speak to anyone, not Caleb, not Aria, not even the few friends I had left. I wandered through the apartment like a ghost, living on tea and toast. My only company, the silence and the file of papers I now kept on my nightstand. I didn't reach out to Michael. I wasn't ready. What do you even say to a man who doesn't know you exist, but who, by all accounts, is your son? Instead, I began watching, quietly, gently, from a distance. Michael owned a little bookstore at the edge of town, nestled between a bakery and a vintage shop. I had passed it dozens of times without knowing the truth behind those green-painted walls. Now I couldn't stay away. The first time I saw him, he was helping a young mother find a children's book. He laughed easily, adjusted his glasses when they slipped, and carried himself with a calm, thoughtful presence. He reminded me of myself. I stood across the street, coffee in hand, pretending to scroll through my phone while tears streamed down my cheeks. I didn't sob. I didn't even sniffle. Just silent, steady tears that wouldn't stop. He looked so kind, so whole, so real. Every day after that, I returned. Sometimes I sat on the bench outside. Sometimes I wandered the block. I learned his routines. Tuesdays were poetry shipments. Fridays, he hosted a reading group. He liked peppermint tea and wore the same faded navy sweater when it rained. It wasn't stalking. It was mourning and preparing. Meanwhile, I began digging into Caleb and Arya's life from the shadows. What I found made me sick. They were living in my house, still in my name. Arya had tried and failed to refinance it. Caleb had quit his job months ago. Arya's so-called coaching business was smoke and mirrors, fake followers, unpaid taxes, and filters hiding the debt piling up behind them. They weren't thriving. They were pretending. And all while I lived on secondhand furniture and ate canned soup. But even through the betrayal, the switch at birth, the realization that Caleb had never truly seen me, I felt no hatred toward Michael. He had shown me more kindness as a stranger than Caleb had in years. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't about blood, it was about choice. Caleb had chosen to dismiss me. Arya had chosen to mock me. Michael, unknowingly, had chosen to treat me with dignity. The love I had spent a lifetime giving didn't vanish. It didn't die. It simply needed a new place to grow. So I kept showing up, not for revenge, but for clarity. And slowly, the ache inside me turned into something else. Hope. It had started with a book. One rainy afternoon, I finally gathered enough courage to walk into the bookstore. Michael was restocking a display near the front, classics and memoirs. The air smelled like paper and cinnamon, a scent I would later come to associate with peace. He greeted me with the same gentle smile he gave every customer. "Looking for something special today?" I handed him a copy of a poetry collection, my voice shaking. This one caught my eye. "Great choice," he said, ringing it up. "Hard to find these days." As he handed me the bag, his fingers brushed mine. A spark, not romantic, not dramatic, but human, familiar. I managed a quiet, "Thank you," and stepped back out into the drizzle, heart pounding. I returned the next day, then again. It became our rhythm. Michael began recognizing me, even looked up and smiled when I walked in. We chatted briefly, books, weather, local news, but never anything deeper. And that was enough. It was something real. Meanwhile, the life I left behind was beginning to rot from the inside. Caleb sent one text. "Mom, are you okay?" 3 weeks after I left. I didn't respond. Instead, I began planning. I pulled the deed to the house, still in my name. Arya had tried to claim value in it, but legally it all belonged to me. I contacted a lawyer, not out of bitterness, but necessity. The house was a symbol of everything I had given. It was time to take it back. I also hired someone, quiet, professional, to investigate Arya's business. What came back was worse than I imagined. Fake invoices, no tax filings, staged partnerships, everything fabricated. She wasn't just pretending, she was committing fraud. I packaged it all neatly. Then, without a return address, I mailed it to Arya's parents, the same ones who laughed in my dining room while she humiliated me. 2 days later, Arya's social media went dark. Her workshops were postponed. Her mother was seen storming out of their house, purse swinging, face red. The cracks had begun to show. But I didn't feel vindictive. I felt focused. While their world crumbled, mine was quietly rebuilding itself. Michael and I had coffee outside the bookstore one afternoon. He told me about how he once wanted to be a teacher, but couldn't stay away from books. I smiled watching him speak, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone who might one day know the truth. He looked at me for a long moment and said, You remind me of someone I can't quite place. I swallowed hard. Maybe a librarian? He laughed. Maybe. That moment stuck with me. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a beginning. The house would soon be listed. Caleb and Aria would have no choice but to move. And I wasn't just walking away from a past that had failed me. I was walking towards something better. Someone better. Myself. The woman I used to be would have begged for understanding. She would have left the door cracked open, just in case someone remembered to care. But that woman was gone. In her place stood someone who no longer needed permission to protect her peace. Every morning, I woke up with purpose. I bought a second-hand laptop and began organizing everything. Notes, receipts, documents. What started as scattered journal entries turned into structured files. I wasn't just processing emotions anymore. I was preparing for something bigger. The house listing moved forward. The legal paperwork was solid. The profits, every cent would come to me, rightfully. But beyond strategy, something deeper was changing inside me. I was no longer reacting. I was choosing. Michael and I continued meeting casually, slowly weaving a quiet thread of familiarity between us. We talked about books, of course, but also about memories, some mine, some his. I listened to the way he described his childhood, loving parents, strong values, a home filled with patience, and I felt a strange peace knowing he had been raised well, even if it wasn't by me. One afternoon, we walked through the farmer's market together. He picked up a jar of apple butter and chuckled. My mom used to make this every fall. It didn't sting, it should have, but it didn't. Because for the first time, I didn't need to be someone's mother to be someone of worth. Caleb, meanwhile, sent another message. This time it read, "Why are you doing this to us?" I stared at it for a long time before deleting it without replying. They weren't ready to accept the truth, that I wasn't doing anything to them. I was doing something for me. And the more I reclaimed my identity, the more grounded I became. I started sleeping through the night again. I planted herbs in my apartment window, a tiny basil garden that filled the kitchen with scent. I began writing not just for healing, but for sharing. A memoir was forming on the page, line by line, not for vengeance, for validation, for every woman who had ever been silenced in her own home. And then, Michael gave me a key. It was a cool morning in late October when he led me to a back room in the bookstore. The sign above the door read, "The Next Chapter." Inside, the space was warm, lined with shelves, a cozy reading chair, and a tea set in the corner. "I want you to have this," he said, "for however long you want it." My hands shook as I took the brass key, not because I needed a room, but because someone saw me, fully, clearly, and offered space, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of respect. I wasn't just healing, I was becoming. The final blow didn't come with fireworks or courtroom drama. It arrived as quietly as a letter in the mail. The house, my house, had officially sold. Full asking price, no extensions. Caleb and Aria had 30 days to vacate. I didn't evict them out of spite. I did it because I had to. That home had become a symbol of everything I lost, everything I gave, and everything I refused to lose again. Watching them pack their designer throw pillows and carefully curated, minimalist trinkets felt like watching a stage set being dismantled. The play was over, and I no longer needed to play a part. I didn't attend the final walkthrough, but I drove past the house one last time. There was Aria, sunglasses on, barking orders at the movers while pretending nothing was collapsing. Caleb stood on the front lawn, aimless and pacing, his phone pressed to his ear, probably trying to find someone else to clean up the mess. But I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt released. Back at the bookstore, Michael and I had begun sharing more than just small talk. He told me about his dreams for the space: author events, poetry nights, quiet reading corners for kids who needed an escape. "You remind me of someone strong," he said once. "Someone who holds everything together when no one else notices." I didn't cry, but I felt it in my bones that this was where I was meant to be all along. He still didn't know the full story, and that was okay. Some truths take time, and when he was ready to hear it, I would tell him, not as a mother demanding recognition, but as a woman offering the truth gently. Meanwhile, Caleb tried one more time. He knocked on my apartment door late one evening. He looked like a shell, unshaven, weary, standing there with nothing but a whisper of regret. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said. I looked him in the eye. "Now you know how I felt." For years, I handed him the envelope with the birth records, the DNA confirmation, and Ruth's handwritten letter. He read it in silence. No dramatic tears, just disbelief and the slow, dawning realization of everything he never saw. "Can we fix this?" he asked. "I don't know," I replied, "but it's not my job to try anymore." And I closed the door, not in anger, but in peace, because for the first time, I wasn't the one left behind. I returned to the bookstore the next morning, key in hand. I walked into the next chapter, my chapter, and made myself a cup of tea. As I stood there, surrounded by shelves and soft light and stories yet to be written, I realized something profound. I didn't lose my life. I reclaimed it. And in that quiet moment, I didn't just feel seen. I felt free. Sometimes the most powerful transformation doesn't come from dramatic moments, but from quiet ones. Evelyn's story reminds us that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a woman handing over a set of keys and walking away from everything she built to finally choose herself. It's easy to lose yourself when you've spent a lifetime giving, to family, to people who take without thanks. But Evelyn shows us that giving doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave. And walking away? That takes more courage than staying ever did. In life, we wait too long for validation that never comes. We shrink ourselves to fit into spaces we've outgrown. But the truth is, your worth isn't defined by how much others see in you. It's defined by how deeply you recognize it in yourself. And when you finally do, that's when the next chapter begins. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, let Evelyn's journey be your mirror and your map. You don't need someone else's permission to choose yourself. Start small, set boundaries, reclaim your space, and remind yourself daily that peace is not a privilege, it's your right. You don't need a dramatic exit to begin again. Maybe it's starting a journal, revisiting an old dream, or simply saying no without apology. Every act of self-respect is a brick in the foundation of your future. You are not too old, not too late. You are exactly on time to come home to yourself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and share with your friends. Your support keeps these stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And if today's story touched your heart, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, stay well, and see you in the next story.